Brilliant, thank you. Right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Schools Forum. My name's David Jeeps, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. Please be aware, members of the public are invited to view this meeting online, and the meeting is recorded. We're meeting virtually in response to limitations placed on governance by the COVID-19 pandemic. The City Solicitor has advised that pursuant to Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this meeting will be run by reference to the model standing orders as set out in the Local Authorities Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority Meetings Regulation 2020 number 392. Forum members are requested to keep their microphones on mute and to only turn these on when you are called to speak. If you have any questions or comments to make on the reports, please use the chat functions and simply write RTS, request to speak. And I just now need to do a bit of a roll call. So in terms of the attendance, do we have Matthew McLaughlin-Parker? No. Do we have Jackie Collins? Yes.
Yes.
Dave Jones, yes. And I know Dave's got some technical issues, so we'll be using the chat functions. Dave Jeeps, obviously present. Cher Dool, is Cher with us?
Yes, I'm here. Yep.
Thank you, Cher. Jason Crouch, I know, is with us, and I know, Jason, you've got to leave at 17:40. Joe Cooper, I can see, so welcome, Joe. Sean Preston, is Sean with us?
Yep, I'm here, thank you.
Thank you, welcome. Nathan, I can see Nathan, yeah. Welcome. Niz, do we have Niz? Okay, Steve Labatz, is Steve here? Sharon Burt,
I'm here.
Is here, thank you, Sharon. I think Councillor Horton, you are here observing.
Indeed I am. Hello.
Oh, good afternoon, Councillor Horton. We have Councillor Claire Oudie.
Hello, how are you? Hello, I'm here.
Very well, Claire, welcome. Councillor Judith Smythe. I can see a camera there, Judith, so I'm going to put her down as not present for the minute, and then I'm sure she'll dial in. Councillor Lynn Stagg.
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome, Lynn. Councillor Terry Norton.
Hi, David. Yes, I am here, but like Councillor Horton, I'm going to stay in an observing capacity because I've got another meeting, so I'll drop in and out if that's okay.
Absolutely, and thank you for your time. Simon Barrable.
Yes, I'm here, David. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Simon. And Cara, I've already said good afternoon to, but nevertheless, good afternoon, Cara. Welcome. So, so I'll just go through. Do we have Matthew McLaughlin-Parker? Niz, Steve.
Yeah, I'm here, David.
Wait, Steve's here. Brilliant. Steve is here. And I can see Councillor Smythe is with us as well. And who else do we have? We've obviously got Alison Edgerton from Local Authority, Lisa Gallagher, Debbie Anderson, and I'm guessing Angela Mann from Local Authority, as well as Mindy Butler, who will be presenting later. Alison Jeffrey, welcome. Sam Galloway, is that right?
Sam's joining us, an observer.
Super, welcome, Sam. And Mike Stoneman, welcome, Mike. If I haven't called your name out and you're present, do you want to make yourself known via the chat? Right, okay. Off we go then for another exciting instalment. So we'll kick off with apologies. Alison, do we have any apologies?
I've not received any apologies.
Brilliant. And Julia Catherine, welcome, Julia. Thank you for that. Right, declarations of interest. I believe there is only one outstanding.
Yes, that's for Simon Barabble, and to say he's only just received that, so I'm sure he will get that to us as soon as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Right, membership changes. Now, I will jump in before we do the main bulk of the changes, and just we have Steve Labatt's leaving us. The escape tunnel is now fully dug. So well done, Steve. So I think 14 years on forum. Is that the total?
14 years continuous, another 4 years before that, with a break when I did escape, but then I got pulled back in.
Yeah. Well, just
it's like a whirlpool, you can't get out.
Well, indeed. Well, deep thanks, Steve. Not just from forum, but I know so many educational communities and committees and meetings, and certainly in my few years at Portsmouth, you have been a giant in the educational landscape. So. Whilst on one hand, we, you'll be greatly missed. On the other hand, of course, Steve, a very well-earned next chapter. And thank you for all you've done for forum. Good luck. And any other changes, though, Alison?
Yes. So we have, as I say, Steve is leaving us. So from my point of view, again, thank you, Steve. Your role on Schools Forum has been extremely helpful over recent years when I've been working with you. There's also Matthew McLaughlin-Parker. This is his last meeting, as the Harbour School will convert to academy status on the 1st of January 2021. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank him for his input into this forum. I'd like to thank Simon Barabble for standing again as the post-16 representative for the city. We currently have 5 vacancies within the forum. That's 3 secondary academy representatives and 2 primary representatives. As previously stated, academy representatives do not need to be head teachers and could be undertaken by any role within the trust. I would really appreciate it if we could get some academy volunteers, and I've asked Mike Stoneman and Alison Jeffrey if they could raise this at the next meeting they have with the multi-academy trusts. And that's it with regards to membership changes.
Brilliant. I don't know if I mentioned, but Julia Catherine, I can see, joined the meeting as well. So welcome to Julia. Right. Item number 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Where are we with the minutes of the previous meeting? So we need to ensure that this is a correct record of the meeting held on the 16th of September. I'll just go through a page at a time, just so that people are happy. If you're not, then RTS in the chat, please. So looking at the first page, which is labelled confusingly page 5. Everyone happy that's accurate? Page 6. Everyone happy that's an accurate record? Page 7. Page 8. And page 9. So is everyone, well, put it this way, would anyone like to correct those minutes? Okay, so we'll take that as an accurate reflection of our meeting. Now, I believe there were some outstanding items. So, Alison, do you want to just fill us in on the matters arising?
Yes, there was one outstanding item with regards to the COVID-19 grant. I did say at the last meeting that we had a meeting coming up with the Department for Education along with other finance officers across the southeast. Unfortunately, the meeting that we had with the DfE was the same day as the spending review, and therefore they weren't able to confirm anything in writing, at that meeting to say whether there were any additional grants for schools. However, on Friday the 27th, there was a press release stating that there would be some funding with regards to staff absences. The guidance hasn't yet been published, but from that press release, they were talking that there could be some additional funding where there are large numbers of absences in schools, and where schools have used up any reserves down to about 4% of their annual income, and the absence rates were above 20% on a short-term basis or 10% on a long-term basis, and or 10%. As we receive any further guidance in more detail, we'll be passing that on to schools.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that update. And I remember last meeting there was a lot of sort of concern about the impact of COVID on school finances. So it's good to hear that there might be some money in the system to meet those costs. Therefore, if that's the only action, I think we can approve the minutes as accurate and move on to agenda item 5. And I think, Alison, you're going to walk us through that one. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Just 1 second, I'll get my notes up. Okay, so with regard to agenda item 5, this is the regular report that sets out the dedicated schools grant forecast position for the 2021 financial year as at the 30th of September 2020. Overall, the dedicated schools grant is forecasting an underspend of 1.4 million, the reasons for which are identified in the report. However, I'd like to draw your attention just to a couple of areas. One is the growth fund, which is forecasting a planned underspend of 284,000. A consultation with schools closed on Friday the 13th of November, and the school funding arrangements report on the agenda sets out the proposal to carry forward the balance on this budget for use on 21-22 financial year. The early years budget, there is an underspend on that, and there is a proposal regarding the use of that underspend, and that's been brought to in a separate report to this meeting, which Schools Forum will be asked to review. Just going through, at the end of September, we had made payments relating to the high needs setting and class lists, and all the early years providers for the summer term, and we'd also made initial payments for the autumn term. Forecasts within the report are based on actual payments and the projected changes to pupil numbers based on our 2019 activity for both the high needs and the early years. There has been lower than expected expenditure for the summer term, in particular in some of the high needs budgets, and this has potentially been linked to the national lockdown, which potentially has reduced the number of pupils who have moved between settings or may have requested an EHCP assessment. It is an area that we are looking at and keeping a close eye on over the course of the autumn term, and we'll be obviously reporting back to Schools Forum and any changes with regards to that in future. The net position provides a forecast carry forward of 4.6 million as at the end of September 20, and Table 8 in the report sets out the potential impact on outstanding decisions on that carry forward balance. It is recommended that Schools Forum notes the forecast year-end position along with the explanations in the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alison. Not so much a question, but just to understand a little bit more about the underspend. So, looks like it's 2 areas: the EHCPs and the outer city placements. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about those, Alison, and sort of what the thinking might be going forward?
Yeah. So, as at the end of September, what we've noticed, particularly over the summer term, was there was a kind of a flurry of activity with the mainstream schools, EHCPs, at the beginning, stroke into the middle of the term. But then obviously the numbers reduced with regards to the national lockdown. We're not too sure whether that is because children weren't in school and therefore weren't being identified. We think potentially this may pick up over the course of the academic year, but because of the timescale with setting up an EHCP, we don't think financially that will hit until the 21-22 financial year. So if there is any underspend in this financial year, that would be carried forward as part of our year-end balances, and then could support any increase that we may see in next financial year. It's a similar story probably with the out-of-city providers, where potentially there may not have been as much movement between providers or with children being placed in provision over the course of the summer term. In particular, we've seen a reduction in the number of children placed within the child and adolescent mental health service. But I think Julia might be able to provide a little bit more information regarding the background to what's happening with the EHCPs.
That'd be great. Julia, do you want to just cut in here for us, please?
Yep, absolutely. So it's because normally for a request for an education, health and care plan, schools would be required to provide 2 terms worth of evidence. So obviously over the summer term, a number of children weren't in school, and so it wasn't possible to collect that evidence. And similarly, if requests to an EHCP are being requested as part of an annual review process, again, schools are collecting evidence in order to inform that. So if children were out of school over the summer term, then obviously that would have had an impact on that. So it doesn't mean there's been no activity, but there's been a reduction over those months.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to understand. Jason.
Yeah, maybe just picking up on that a little further, Alison and Julia. It's pleasing to hear that that money is being retained for use. Is there anything we can be thinking on in terms of not just using that to handle the backlog, but it boost, whether it's only temporarily, the ability to assess those claims? Because parents, I know, are frustrated on the length of time it takes. And with this added lockdown, it's just increasing that time frame. Is there anything else we can do with that money, aside from just keeping it there to review the backlog, but increase the support we give them so that backlog timeline can be reduced further?
In terms of timescales, we are pretty much 100% within the statutory timescales in Portsmouth. There's no delays in terms of assessments. We have been discussing with schools, and the feedback we've had from Senkos when we met with them this term was that we should expect to see an increase. In effect, there's a bit of a backlog that they're now working through. So we're continuing to support Senkos in pulling that evidence together and submitting it. But the actual assessments, there's no delays with those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, points of clarification? I mean, I suppose I don't think I've ever known the high needs block to be underspent, so it's a very unusual position we find ourselves in. I suppose the concern is that, I think you're quite right, Julia and Alison, in what you're saying, and one thinks there might be a bit of a kind of quite a lot of coming through the system, as it were, in the next couple of terms. So I'm sure this is going to come back to us in future meetings. Any other questions before we move on? Right. I've been asked to just tweak the order, and therefore what's being proposed is that the next item we look at is item number 7. That's right, isn't it? So we're looking at the paper, and I think, is Mindy going to take us through that? Is that the plan?
Yeah, hi there.
Hi,
okay.
Mindy.
Hello. So this is an early years request for the purpose of the report is to get additional funding in the form of a one-off grant to support the sustainability of the early years market. It applies to all providers across the city who offer funded early years provision for 2-, 3- and 4-year-olds, regardless of whether or not they were able to open during the first coronavirus lockdown. So what we are asking is for you to endorse the grant values of £2,700 for early years settings and £500 for childminders. This would reflect the extra costs of overhead staffing and numbers of children in nurseries and preschools in comparison with childminders who work from home and care for less children. The early years sector, it's well noted at the moment, is experiencing many financial challenges as a result of the pandemic. And the early years team have been working hard over the past few months to ensure sufficiency and sustainability for our providers, both now and in the future. Many of our settings stayed open during the first lockdown to provide childcare for critical worker children and vulnerable children. And some settings were unable to remain open due to the nature of the building that their business is run from. Some had a number of staff who were shielding, and some had children at home or were unable to open for other reasons. All Portsmouth early years providers were paid in full on their forecast task at the beginning of April 2020, and some received business rate relief where it was applicable. Any setting that actually delivered over and above the hours paid to them on their forecast were paid for these additional hours at the end of the summer term. However, significant financial challenges have been faced by the sector through the loss of private fees due to low numbers of children attending in the summer and at the beginning of the autumn term. The numbers of children attending early years settings is now increasing. However, many settings this term have had to close due to positive coronavirus cases, and this again has impacted on their private fee income. Also to be noted is that many parents have changed their working patterns and they no longer need childcare for a full working day. And some who are working from home are choosing to keep their children with them to keep their costs down. There have also been increased running costs since the pandemic began in the form of requiring extra staff in order that bubbles of children could be maintained with no staff crossover, and also for extra staff and time to manage the infection control guidelines, and also the significant cost of the extra cleaning fluid that needs to be applied on a daily basis. So during this autumn term, we funded providers as advised by the DfE, as if autumn 20 was happening normally. In order to do this, we paid providers based on their indicative budget using autumn 2019 hours. We know that 23 providers across the city have had significantly lower numbers this year than last year, and therefore this approach has actually helped them to remain sufficient for this term. Next term we'll be paying based on the headcount task as usual. We haven't heard anything from the DfE to contradict that so far. And some settings who haven't seen a significant increase in numbers may find themselves with a much lower income in January than in previous years. Over the past few months, we have engaged Hempsels, early years consultants, to engage with our providers and offer business support. Advice has been given to the providers to help them change their business models and help them maximise occupancy. And the support's been really well received, and many settings have started to implement some of these business models to their provision. Over 50% of providers participated in this and expressed to us some concern over their future sufficiency. So really, this grant would support future sufficiency, give an extra boost to the continued recovery of the sector moving into 21, and would enable our early years providers to be able to continue to support working parents and our most vulnerable children in Portsmouth, and also for them to continue to receive such an important and valuable start to their early years education. I'm happy to take any questions.
Just a couple from me. Well, firstly, an observation. Obviously, I think your points about working patterns changing quickly is very well made, and early years are going to feel that instantly, and it'll be interesting to see post-COVID whether those patterns continue. But in terms of the grants, £2,700 for preschools and nurseries, does it depend on the size, or is that a one-off amount? Is that the proposal, just a one-off?
Yeah, it's a one-off amount, largely because the biggest costs tend to be for obviously the rent of the building, the staffing costs, and we just think that the smaller providers as well as the larger providers are all suffering the same issues at the moment. So we decided a straight one-off payment to everyone would be very welcome.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And is there a sense that that's enough? I mean, people always want more, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in our sector at the moment, before the pandemic, there were issues with sustainability and sufficiency. So I think anything at the moment would be welcome. I think so far this term they've had those that have needed it have had the boost from having the indicative payment from last year, and for some that has given them a considerable cash boost this term to keep them going. So I think it will really help. I think it will pay for those extra costs that are so significant at the moment. To replace staff who've had to go off if they're self-isolating, and as I say, the infection control is really a significant extra cost that hasn't been factored in across the sector.
Okay, Alison, you got your hand up.
Yes, I just really wanted to clarify from the grants point of view that with regards to the types of providers, we can't pay the same type of provider a different amount. So we have to pay that whole sector the same amount. We can't differentiate under the regulations.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions, observations?
So if I can say, David, that obviously money in early years is very tight, as I've said many a time. I do feel this would be a welcome amount for the early years, but again, for some businesses, I don't think it will touch their sustainability. So I think we need to be really careful.
Yeah, I agree. I have to say that of all the parts of the education system, early years is probably going to go through quite a transformation in the next sort of 12, 24 months as new working habits and patterns are established. Is something I think that again is going to come back to this group in the future, but it feels like the right thing to do to make a grant. And what I think we are being asked to do is to endorse those values, and also note that a further review of the DSG early years block funding expenditure will be undertaken. Is that correct, Mindy?
Yes, it is. Yes, thank you.
So in terms of voting, Alison, how do we, I think this is a vote for everyone gets to vote on this. So if we take it as a block to endorse and note, is that okay?
That's okay. Yes, everybody's able to vote.
And so what I'll need in a second, so fingers on the buzzers as it were, is I will need a proposer for the approval of the recommendations, and also a seconder. So I shall pause as per my script. So,
sorry, David, I don't know whether you've realised Councillor Judith Smythe has her hand up.
I've just seen that, so thank you, Judith. She's proposing, and a seconder is okay. So Sherdal is going to second. Thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder. So the recommendation has been proposed and seconded. I will now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there is no dissent, the proposal is passed. Are there any objectors to the recommendations? If you wish to object, please RTS in the chat function. Right, good. That's carried then, so thank you all. So we'll now jump to what is on your paperwork. Oh, I've got an RTS there, Judith, sorry.
I was very happy to propose that, but what I wanted to say is how closely are we keeping the state of the market in early years under study, and do we know how many have had to close down already? I mean, good quality early years education is absolutely crucial for the future, and we'll see the impact in schools in 1, 2 and 3 years time if there are real problems. How much do we know? And I wonder if it's worth the next school forum having a report about this, or looking at it globally? Because I know it's a sector that's been under great strain nationally, and I'm sure we're no exception. Well, but what you've said, we're no exception there.
So we've had 3 settings who have closed by the end of the summer, who had sufficiency problems anyway, and we have one more that we think will probably have to close in April unless their numbers really increase. Last year, I wrote the sufficiency report for early years in Portsmouth, and we were in a really good position. What's good to note is that for all of the settings that close, we have got some bigger providers that want to open other settings. So it seems that at the moment, we've got a lot of interest, even though the market is very insecure at the moment. We've got a lot of interest of people actually wanting to open early years settings. So I will be writing the sufficiency report again in March, and hope to have some updates on that. But at the moment, we're keeping a really close eye on it. We're in contact with all of our providers on a regular basis. They're coming to us for lots of business support. And I don't feel at the moment that we're in a position where if settings close, we won't have other people coming forward to open. So at the moment, I think it's looking just about okay.
Good. Okay. I think you implied that earlier on. I mean, I think it is important that providers look at the new, slightly different working arrangements that are going to go on after COVID. More working at home, more need for flexibility, and more need for perhaps some slightly different routines when it comes to early years care.
Yeah, the business support that we've been taking from Hempsall's, they very much focused on business remodelling for early years, and looking at how they can change their hours and sort of take more funding and just be a little bit more creative in their thinking about how they operate. So some of our settings already are starting to implement those things. So we'll have to monitor that and see how it goes.
Thank you. And I think Cara,
thank you for elaborating that.
Okay, welcome. Thanks, Mindy. So, and Cara, did you want to add something before we move on?
Yeah, I just don't feel it's fair to say that there are new settings opening that will take the place of existing providers. We've got some outstanding providers and some providers who've got years of educational experience that are at risk of closure. And I am very concerned that the attitude at the moment seems to be, well, we've got a sufficiency issue, but we'll just replace them. We need to be careful that we are not losing expertise in early years.
I absolutely agree, Cara, and that's not what I meant at all. I mean, the thing is that we have the settings that have closed. If we could keep them open, we would have done. And obviously, we're trying really hard with all the extra business support to keep our providers that are open. But we do have also a lot of people standing in the wings. Some who aren't even existing providers, but people who are looking for spaces to open up. So, if the worst comes to the worst, which we hope it doesn't, because as you say, we've got really good providers across the city, then that's at least in terms of being able to accommodate all of our working parents and vulnerable children, we do have options. But obviously our intention is to keep our settings that we have sufficient, which hence the grant.
Which I do respect, but I do feel we just need to have it minuted that there are settings out there who've not been eligible for any financial support throughout COVID, and this is a very small grant that they will get, and actually some of them are really struggling and working huge amounts of hours for free to try and keep their businesses sustainable.
Thank you, Cara. I think we all concur that this is a very key part of the educational landscape, as Judith said. It's vital children get that great start to their educational journey. And I think the point, which was very well made by Judith, about having a flexible approach. There will be new ways of working. And families will find themselves working differently, working much more from home probably going forward, and the sector I sense has a challenge there to quickly adapt to this new landscape. That said, what we do know about education and the educational landscape in the city is we adapt very quickly, and I'm confident that they will. But yeah, it'll be great to hear a follow-up report in a future meeting, Mindy, particularly around the question of sufficiency. And I'd personally be very interested to hear a bit more about how settings are embracing the new world post-COVID, whatever that looks like. Okay, so if everyone's happy, what we'll do then is move on to what is now going to be item 7, which is the school funding arrangement for 2021-2022. Angela, I think you're going to walk us through that one, and we at the end of it will be noting, hopefully, and then 2 notes and an 3 endorsements and a couple of notes. So Angela, over to you.
Thanks, David. So in terms of the report, it is updating you on the guidance from the high needs block and asking for an endorsement of the proposals. The mainstream education, health and care plan banding, and it also contains information about the consultation regarding the proposed carry forward of the growth fund, and it also asks for the endorsement of the proposal for the carry forward of the growth fund as required. And finally, the report asks for the endorsement of the rates for the early year providers for 21-22. So the information's in the report, but just to say that at the moment the indicative funding for the high needs block is an increase of 12.7%, but we do think that this will change slightly as the DfE's confirmed that they've only been able.
Angela, can I just stop you? You're breaking up quite a lot. Can I suggest you switch off your camera just to see if it can stabilise your internet?
Some of the information because sorry. Can you hear me any better now? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Right. Hopefully you've heard. I was just reiterating what the report was for. But in terms of the high needs block, the indicative funding shows an increase of 12.7%. But we know that it doesn't include all of the things because they had to take. I think they took information from July, and so it excludes some information of allocation, and it's not that it's just been excluded. The main thing for the high needs block has been the change to include the teachers' pay and pensions grants as set out in table 1, which is similar to the schools block, but the way that money will be passed on to the special schools is that it will be given as an additional grant, and it won't actually affect the place or top-up funding for those schools. In terms of the information on the consultation that went to schools, table 2 summarises the responses that we've had from the schools. There was one query regarding the change to IDACI in terms of the schools block, and the response is in paragraph 6.5, and the school has been contacted and the impact explained to them, which is that if it becomes a negative impact, then the minimum funding guarantee would compensate for that. In terms of the mainstream health and care plans, the responses are set out in Appendix 2, and paragraph 6.8 to 6.14 in the report is the responses to those. And in the light of the comments and the responses, it's not proposed to make any changes to the banding criteria as set out in a briefing document that went to the schools. And the banding values will be brought to schools forum in January 2021 in addition. In terms of the consultation for carrying forward the growth fund balances, out of the 4 schools that responded, they all agreed with the proposal, and therefore it is proposed to carry forward the balance to 21-22. Moving on to early years, we are still waiting guidance regarding the early years block, and that will be brought to schools forum and cabinet member for children, families and education, along with any changes to the rates once we have that. Until that time, we're proposing endorsement of the rates as in table 5 of the report. I don't know whether anybody's got any questions on the funding report.
Right, I've got not so much a question, but a challenge. When we look at the number of responses received, which is 4 out of a potential 61, it's very, it's disappointing. I wonder really if anyone's got any views on how we can sort of better engage, particularly the academy sector. It's a real shame that we've got 0 responses from that part of the landscape. And I know it's difficult because I think COVID's made everything very stretched and all the rest of it. But I suppose my question here is, how can we get more responses back into our consultations? But that's really a sort of a rhetorical question, I suppose. I'll leave that one there. Right, Sean. Is Sean wishing to make a comment?
Yeah, just a quick question really. Just obviously you reference MFG within the document. I just wanted to clarify, subject to affordability, is the intention that is set at the 2% that's stipulated within the national funding formula, and if the final allocation that comes through from the DfE is not affordable in terms of a full national funding formula, is the intention to reduce the MFG down to below 2%, because if it is, there may be differing options we can look at to ensure all schools receive their full national funding formula. So that's just a question I wanted to ask.
Angela, are you in a position to answer that one?
Yes. So in terms of, we brought the paper on the process that we'd go through for the schools block last time. And so we said that once we had the final allocation, we would look to changing the area cost adjustment first, and after that we would be looking at managing the affordability through the MFG. So once we know the full impact of the IDACI, then it would be the area cost adjustment and the minimum funding guarantee that we would look at adjusting. I mean, because we've gone with the national funding formula, there's not a lot to distribute all the funding to the schools.
Thank you. Sean, did you want to follow up?
Yes, please, that's okay, yeah. So I think it's, again, important, in my opinion, that all schools should receive their full national funding formula as far as is possible, subject to affordability. And I would just like to put out an option on the table in the eventuality that there isn't enough funding so that all schools can receive their national funding formula, that potentially the excess funding in the growth pot could be utilised to support that allocation so that all schools receive their full national funding formula as an option to be discussed if that eventuality occurs. Just to put that on the table, really.
And really, Sean, I think you echo a number of forum members over the years have urged for some options on the table for us to consider. And so what I would like to task Andrew and Alison with is as much as possible, and we do understand that sometimes the announcements are made very late, but as much as possible, to give members of this group opportunities to look at different options and weigh them up and sort of make decisions, I think is the key thrust of that point, and it's one I would absolutely support. Thank you for your comment there, Sharon. Good thinking. Alison, did you want to respond?
Sorry, with regards to coming back with options, the one issue we have is timescales. We're not normally not notified of our funding until that last week of the school term. Obviously, that funding then has to go through our model to make sure we understand what the affordability issues are. We then have coming back to Schools Forum on the 13th of January with any proposals with regards to the changes, and we then need to notify the DFE of what the school's budget will be by I think it's the 21st of January next year. So our timing is very tight, which is why we agree the proposals with regards to trying to tackle the area cost adjustment and the minimum funding guarantee is the areas we will look at with regards to affordability. As I've said previously, our current growth fund does require some of the carry forward there to support that in future years. And we have made commitments to those schools that have increased their numbers, particularly in the secondary sector, to support them with managing the lag in the funding for that. Obviously, when we get our allocation through, the growth funding that we are predicting to receive has a potential for being higher, and that's purely because of the way that the funding allocation to authorities works. If that is the case, then we are able to put additional funding back into the individual schools' budgets and maximise the use of the MFG as much as possible.
Okay. I'm just noting on the chat, thank you, Alison, on the chat, Mike Stoneman's good suggestion. And he has reminded us that last year we did have some dedicated briefings, and perhaps in the interests of getting more participation, we should look at doing that in the future, having these sort of online briefings available to talk people through consultation documents and have workshops straight afterwards to get responses. I think that's a really good idea, Mike, and I think Alison and Angela, could we consider that for future consultations?
Yes. Sorry, David, in terms of going back as well to sort of the growth funding, we sort of had this discussion at the last school forum, and I mean the MFG will be between 0.5% and the 2% as per the national formula, so and it wasn't endorsed by Schools Forum last time, and we got cabinet member approval for it, and likewise in terms of the growth fund, we've gone out to consultation about carrying that forward, and obviously Schools Forum have still got to decide on the endorsement of that in this meeting, but there's so for this year we have had the endorsement to flex the MFG after the area cost adjustment.
Yeah, no, that is understood. No, and I do understand that time is difficult, which is why you sequence things as you do. But I suppose the spirit behind the question or the challenge on the table is that forum members want as much as is practicable some options to look at. And that's been the case for a while. It's not not a new thing, and that's what we'd urge you to work towards.
Yeah. And the other thing to note though is that anything that we've got in the growth funding is really one-off, and so that's the other thing, not one-off funding for a recurring nature. So those are the things that need to be balanced. But happy to work with anybody, and like you say, in terms of engagement, and perhaps the meetings again might encourage more engagement in the consultations that we do.
I mean, is there an appetite around the forum at the moment for to take up Angela's invite that a small group maybe work with officers?
We wouldn't be able to do it for this year because schools forums already endorsed the approach that we're going to take for distributing the funding.
Yeah, no, but going forward.
Yes.
Okay, but going forward, that's something we could facilitate. Sean.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, in terms of what I was suggesting there, it wasn't necessarily putting options as to how to distribute the funding. The point I was trying to make was that if the full national funding formula is stipulated by the DfE is not affordable, that actually we need to look at, number one, can we make it affordable, which could be done by diverting some growth funding. Whilst I fully understand the rationale behind keeping it for future years, there are other options. It wasn't about necessarily looking at different options about how the funding is distributed, because I am very much a supporter of the national funding formula being distributed out as fully as is possible, as stipulated by the DfE. So just to clarify, it's not necessarily looking at options, it's looking at affordability around ensuring schools receive as much of their national funding formula as is possible. So just to clarify.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And they will, because then what happens then is that the minimum funding guarantee then adds to that to make schools get at least 0.5% increase for the pupils that they've got. But it's just once we've got all the facts, because we know the funding that's coming in, it's actual minimum funding guarantee. But I'm happy, we can talk about it outside this meeting, Sean, if that's easier.
Yeah, I think again, it's being very clear that the DfE are stipulating that the national funding formula stipulates that all schools will receive 2% MFG as a minimum, and if we move against that and reduce that down because of affordability, that means that those schools will not receive their full national funding formula. It's just to be clear and very open and transparent with that fact, that's all.
I believe the DfE guidance is that it's at least 0.5% and up to 2%. So that's the guidance, and that's what we'll be working to.
Okay. Well, it would be important just to clarify this 2%. I'm not that familiar with the guidance that I could answer that one. So do you want to just double check what the guidance says, Angela, just so we've got that clarity? And I take Cher's very sensible suggestion that if we are going to have a small group working more closely with officers, we do need to get volunteers in early. Rather than put Angela and Alison on the spot in the meeting, what I would suggest as a way forward is we let them consider for next year how that might look, and how more targeted input from forum members could support them, and come back to us at the next meeting with a plan. Does that seem reasonable, Angela?
The next meeting's going to be in January, so ideally I'd like to talk about it in the meeting, if possible.
Okay, so not the next meeting, the meeting after, which I haven't got the date here, but I'm guessing it will be March time, something like that. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, it's likely to be February.
February. So if just to make sure we don't lose sight of this one, so if for the February meeting we could if you guys could consider how a forum member or a very small group of forum members might work more closely with you just to explore options. I think that's a really healthy way forward and makes good use of the talent. I was going to say round the table, but across the screen as it is these days. Right. Okay. Are there any more questions or comments on the report as tabled? Okay, in that case, what I propose to do is we move on to the voting. So as ever, I'm going to need a proposer and a seconder, please. And the idea is to do it en bloc. So we're proposing and seconding 1.11 around the note, the DFE's proposed changes to high needs block revenue funding arrangements. We're endorsing the funding arrangements for maintained and academy special schools and independent schools. We are noting the responses that schools have made following the consultation. We are endorsing the proposed carry forward of the growth fund balances and also endorsing the proposed hourly rates for the early years providers. Right. Okay, so Cher, thank you for proposing. Sharon, thank you for seconding. The recommendation has been proposed and seconded. I'll now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there is no dissent, the proposal is passed. Are there any objectors to this recommendation? If you do object, please RTS now. Okay. Brilliant. So that one's gone through. So thank you, Angela, and thank you all for your input on that. So where are we now? I think we are there, are we not? Yes. Gosh. So there we go. So that concludes the meeting today. Thank you, everyone. For your participation. It's probably a little bit early, but I will wish you all festive joys. And it's the first time I've done that. It feels a bit, it's December, so you know, whatever Christmas looks like in your world and your bubble, I should say. You know, I sincerely hope you have a lovely, relaxing time, a healthy time. We will hopefully see most of you, but not you, Mr. Levitz. On the 13th of January 2021. Do enjoy your time off. We're almost there, guys. Thank you all, and we'll see you all very, very soon. So I now need to let Peter Smith Parkin know that the live stream is about to end. So bye, everyone.
Bye, David. Thanks a lot.
Bye. Merry Christmas.
Bye, everyone.
Merry Christmas,
everyone.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye.
Yes.